You don't belong in first class. Move to the back, before I call security. Those were the exact words that lead flight attendant Karen Mitchell spat out at a well-dressed black man just 5 minutes after boarding. And she didn't whisper it. She said it loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear, loud enough to cut the air like broken glass. What Karen didn't know was that the man she just humiliated wasn't just a passenger. He wasn't a stowaway. And he wasn't pretending to belong. He was Marcus Bennett, CEO of Pinnacle Investment Group and the head of one of the most powerful law firms in the country. And in 30 minutes, he would bring Horizon Airlines to its knees, cancel a $3 billion deal, and spark a firestorm that would change everything. Before we take you inside Flight HA237, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe in fairness and justice, like and subscribe to help more people see what really happened that morning. Now, let's take you inside Horizon Airlines Flight HA237 on the runway at JFK International Airport, 8:00 a.m. sharp. July 2nd, Marcus Bennett, 45 years old, had boarded the plane just moments before. He wasn't there to show off. He wasn't there to cause a scene. He was there for business. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit with tailored trousers, polished brown shoes, and the quiet confidence that only comes from decades of fighting uphill battles. Marcus sat down in seat 2A of the first-class cabin. This flight wasn't just any trip. It was the final step in securing a $3 billion partnership deal with Horizon Airlines to help expand their fleet. But there was more to his presence than business. Over the last year, complaints had begun to surface online, stories from passengers of color who'd felt mistreated, overlooked, or outright targeted by Horizon crew. Marcus wanted to see for himself. What he didn't know, what none of us could have expected, was how fast the test would come. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes into his quiet moment of settling in, sipping water, adjusting his seatbelt, when a white man in a tailored gray suit, Richard Langley, a so-called VIP passenger seated 2 rows back, approached the galley where Karen was prepping drinks. What happened next was discreet, but not invisible. Richard leaned in and slipped her something, a folded bill, a low whisper, and then the words, "That man in 2A. He doesn't look right. Might steal my watch. A $200 bribe." That's all it took to turn suspicion into action. Karen didn't hesitate. She straightened her posture, tucked the money away like it was a casual tip, and marched down the aisle toward Marcus's seat with the fake smile of forced authority. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass," she demanded. Marcus, ever composed, handed it over without flinching. She barely glanced at it before saying, "This looks fake. I'm going to need you to move to the back of the plane." Now, his eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," he said. "This is my seat." David Walsh, another flight attendant, appeared right behind her, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. "This cabin's reserved for premium guests," he said with a chuckle. "Not dress-ups." It was a slap without a hand. Next came Stephen Hayes, the co-pilot, poking his head through the cockpit door. He can't afford a $1,200 seat like that. Look at him. That's when Sophie Nguyen, a tech blogger in seat 2C, pulled out her phone and hit record. One quiet sentence under her breath, "Racism on Horizon Airlines." No hashtags, no captions, just the raw moment. She posted it straight to X. As the video went live, another flight attendant, a trainee named Jamal Carter, walked down the aisle with a fresh stack of welcome kits. When he reached Marcus, he smiled. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you a warm towel or juice?" But Karen barked. "He doesn't need anything. He's not staying." Jamal paused. "Ma'am, I saw his boarding pass. It looked. He's new." Karen cut in sharply. "He can't spot fakes." The condescension in her tone said everything. From across the aisle, a woman in a cream-colored designer outfit, Olivia Grant, Another first-class passenger was offered champagne and a croissant. Not a word said to her about proof of purchase. Marcus looked at Karen, calm but steady. Is there a reason I'm being asked to leave my paid seat before she could respond? Richard called out from his seat, smirking. You're a risk to valuables. Just move and save everyone the trouble. Excuse me, Marcus replied, voice lowering. I paid for this seat. I've done nothing wrong. Karen raised her voice. You're disrupting first class. Move now, or I will call airport police. Jamal, visibly uneasy, whispered. This doesn't feel right. From the row behind, a woman named Chloe Evans looked up from her Kindle. This is disgusting, she said aloud. Let the man sit. On the opposite end, a black man named Ethan Powell stood up. You're treating him differently. We all see it. That's when Marcus quietly reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed. Natalie. He said into the line. Activate internal escalation. I want eyes on this flight now. His assistant on the other end replied. Already tracking. Just say the word. It's set. He whispered. And it's going live. Karen, meanwhile, was still pressing. Sir, either you move or we will have you physically removed. Marcus turned to her. I suggest you don't go that route. What are you gonna do? David smirked. Sue us in your dreams. I'm staying right here. Marcus answered. Karen rolled her eyes. Your suit doesn't fool us. Stephen leaned back in. This plane's not a courtroom. Sir, move. Jamal stood taller now. This is wrong, he said to Karen. He's done nothing. Sophie, still recording, added. This is being streamed. People are watching. David chuckled darkly. They'll forget by lunchtime. Richard folded his arms. People like him don't belong in this cabin. That's when Marcus pulled out the boarding pass again. Here, look at it again. Karen snatched it, glanced for less than a second, and tossed it back toward him like trash. Fake, she said coldly. A visible gasp spread through the cabin. You're ruining Horizon's reputation, Marcus said quietly. I hope you realize that. Ethan crossed his arms. Not just Horizon, this whole industry. Chloe leaned toward Sophie. Keep filming. Sophie nodded. Already live. And through it all. Marcus remained seated, silent, resolute, watching, waiting. This wasn't the first time he'd faced this kind of dismissal, but it might be the last time someone got away with it, because what Karen, David, and Stephen didn't know was that the man in 2A had more than a ticket. He had the power to crash the airline's stock and tear open a system too long left unchecked. And it all started with a $200 bribe, a fake smile, and 6 words, you don't belong in first class. Security will be waiting at the gate if you're still in that seat. Those were the next words from Karen, sharp as a knife, meant to intimidate. But Marcus didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move. But every muscle in his jaw was tight now. Every second dragged like wet concrete. Co-pilot Stephen Hayes returned from the cockpit and leaned into the aisle, voice loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. You had your little protest moment. Now it's time to move before this becomes a flight delay, David Walsh added with a mocking smile. This isn't a courtroom. It's a premium cabin. And you're in the wrong place. Jamal Carter, still holding a tray of warm towels, looked between the crew and Marcus with growing disbelief. He's not doing anything wrong. That's his name on the seat list. I saw it. Karen turned on him. You're a trainee. Stay in your lane. Just behind Marcus, Richard Langley, the white VIP who had started it all, crossed his legs and said with a smirk, this would never happen if airlines stopped trying to be so inclusive. Look what that gets you. His voice oozed superiority. People like him think a nice suit gets them through any door. And that was it. That was the moment Sophie Nguyen, still recording quietly, Hit the button to go live on Reddit. No caption, no embellishment, just a live stream with the title. Passenger mistreated in first class, Horizon Airlines, in seat 3D. Chloe Evans pulled out her phone too. So did Ethan Powell. A quiet current of support was beginning to form. You could feel it. Still. Karen moved forward, hand on Marcus's seat. Stand up, sir. I won't ask again. He looked at her, really looked, and said, in a voice both calm and cutting, I'm not going anywhere. If you choose to escalate this, you'll regret it. Karen sneered. Is that a threat? No, he replied. It's a promise, but inside. Something deeper was stirring. A wound Marcus had carried for decades. He wasn't new to this. At 22, fresh out of college and ready to take on the world, he'd been stopped at an airport gate in Atlanta. Different airline, different city. Same excuse. You don't look like you can afford this seat. That humiliation had lived in his chest ever since, and it had shaped him. He turned that rage into drive, built Pinnacle Investment Group from the ground up, built a law firm that never lost a civil rights case, but no amount of success could shield him from moments like this. Not today, not on this flight. Karen motioned to David, who stepped forward, fingers twitching as if ready to grab Marcus's arm. If he won't move, we may need to restrain him, David muttered. The temperature in the cabin dropped. Don't touch me, Marcus said firmly. That would be your final mistake today. Jamal stepped between them. You will not lay a hand on him, Karen snapped. That's enough. Get back to the galley. Carter, Sophie, still filming, called out. Reddit's already watching. Don't embarrass yourselves further. Karen spun around. You can't record us wrong. Sophie replied. Public incident on a commercial flight. I know my rights, the passengers murmured. Chloe said loud enough for all to hear. I don't care who he is. He's being treated like a criminal for wearing a suit while black, Ethan added. And if it were me, I'd be in handcuffs already. The cabin was shifting. Marcus pulled out his phone again. Natalie, he said into the call. Confirm status. His assistant's voice came through clear. The internal system is live. Every move is being logged. Good, he said. We're escalating. David rolled his eyes and muttered. What's next? A class action lawsuit. Karen forced a bitter laugh. He's just posturing. But then Jamal, young, nervous, but clearly done with silence, spoke up, his voice shaking with truth. This isn't the first time, he said, looking straight at Karen. I've seen her do this before. Complaints come in. She ignores them, especially if the passengers are black or brown. Dead silence fell across the cabin. Karen's jaw tightened. You better be careful, she warned him. You're risking your job. No, Jamal shot back. I'm saving it, and maybe saving this airline while I'm at it. In that moment. Sophie turned her phone around, showing the screen to the nearest passengers. Richard bribed her. It's on video. You can hear it. He said Marcus might steal his watch. She took the money. Chloe gasped. Ethan muttered. I knew it. Olivia Grant, who until now had remained quietly sipping champagne, set down her glass and said plainly, This isn't luxury. This is targeted harassment. The crew froze. Karen's face went pale. David looked down. Stephen ducked back into the cockpit. And Marcus, still seated, still calm, said, I gave this airline a chance to prove it was better than the complaints. You failed that test, Karen shouted. This man is disturbing the cabin, but the passengers didn't move. In fact, several stood up. Chloe crossed her arms. Ethan took a step forward. We're not going to let you throw him out, he said. We're done being silent, Sophie added, and the internet's watching, every second. Marcus turned once more to Natalie. Ready to move? Yes, sir, she said. The system is hot. Just say the word. Not yet, he said. Let them keep talking. His eyes met Karen's. You're showing the world exactly who you are. Karen tried to salvage control. This is a misunderstanding. Let's handle this privately. Marcus didn't blink. No more back rooms. No more apologies and press releases. You embarrassed me publicly. Now face the consequences the same way. Jamal looked at Marcus, then at the crowd of passengers now silently standing behind him. You're not alone. Sir. Marcus nodded. I know. Then he turned back to Karen. But you're about to be... And just like that, the tide in the cabin shifted fully. The power dynamic turned. The man they tried to humiliate was no longer the target. He was the center of gravity, and all eyes were locked on what he would do next. I've given you every opportunity to do the right thing, Marcus said calmly, rising slowly from seat 2A, adjusting his navy suit jacket with the quiet grace of someone who had nothing to prove. But you've mistaken my patience for weakness, Karen scoffed, stepping back slightly. But the smirk on her face hadn't faded. Is that so, she said. Because last I checked, you're still a passenger refusing crew instructions. Marcus looked her dead in the eye. Let me make something clear. Since titles seem to matter so much on this flight, I'm Marcus Bennett, CEO of Pinnacle Investment Group, managing over $12 billion in global assets. I'm also managing partner of Bennett and Associates Law. And the seat you tried to rip me out of, I paid for it. Same as anyone here. The moment hung in the air like a snapped violin string. Karen blinked. Then she laughed. A brittle, disbelieving sound. You, she said, looking him up and down with a tilt of her head. In that suit. You're no CEO. You're a liar. You probably printed that ticket at home. David, standing to her right, didn't even bother pretending to hide his disgust. He clicked on the intercom and said, We have a non-compliant passenger refusing to vacate a premium seat, claims to be a corporate executive. We may need assistance. From the cockpit, Stephen shouted without leaving his post. If he doesn't comply, we'll divert the flight. Let TSA handle him on the tarmac. Several passengers gasped. Marcus didn't flinch. He reached into his coat pocket and slowly pulled out a slim, engraved card case. With 2 fingers, he slid out a black titanium business card with his name. Marcus D. Bennett, embossed in silver lettering. Look it up, he said to Karen, offering it without a word of anger. Just cold, exacting certainty. Karen slapped it away. Anyone can order something fancy online. That was the moment Sophie raised her voice from across the cabin. It's already trending on Reddit. She said, They just pulled up his profile and company website. This isn't a lie. He's telling the truth. David looked shaken for the first time. That doesn't prove anything. He muttered. Maybe it's identity theft. Jamal, now standing protectively behind Marcus, said firmly, I recognize him. He's real. I saw his face during our diversity training materials. He was a featured partner. Karen turned to him sharply. You better watch yourself. Carter? No, Jamal replied. You better. Chloe Evans stepped into the aisle, followed by Ethan Powell. We're not letting you kick him out, Chloe said. You've crossed the line, Ethan added. You're willing to reroute a whole plane because you're embarrassed Karen's face twisted. We're trying to protect passengers. From what Marcus asked, his voice now firmer. From being near someone who looks like me. From the truth. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It was the voice of a man who'd argued before judges, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, and comforted grieving families in boardrooms after injustice. Karen looked around. Passengers were filming, whispering, standing. The tide had fully turned. Then she snapped. Not in volume, but in desperation. Fine, she muttered. You want the truth? There was a case last year. A man, a black man, claimed he was mistreated by our crew. We denied it, said he lied, but I knew it was real. I just didn't want it to become a thing. The cabin went silent. Sophie's phone was still recording. The live stream hadn't paused. Karen had just admitted to a cover-up. So you buried it, Marcus said quietly. And now you're doing it again. Karen looked panicked now. I didn't mean to say that out loud. But you did. Marcus replied. David stepped back like the floor had just cracked under him. Stephen's voice came again from the cockpit, less certain now. Do we have a resolution? Yes, Marcus said, turning toward the cockpit. The resolution is that you're all about to be unemployed. Sophie posted the clip instantly, labeling it Flight Crew Admits Cover-Up. CEO denied seat. The cabin began to buzz with passenger outrage. You're really the CEO, someone whispered from row 1. Yes, Marcus answered simply. And I was here to finalize a $3 billion deal with this airline. That deal is now in serious jeopardy. Karen stumbled back. Wait. What David looked pale. You were here for Horizon, I was, Marcus said. Until this moment. He turned to the passengers behind him, who were now rising, not in panic, but in solidarity. No one's being removed today except the people who caused this mess. Chloe and Ethan stood shoulder to shoulder. Others joined, closing in around Marcus like a quiet shield of protection. If anyone touches him, Ethan said loudly, they'll have to go through all of us. Karen looked trapped. She turned to David. Get security on the radio. Too late, Sophie said. It's already everywhere. By the time we land, every news outlet in the country will know exactly what happened here. Richard Langley, the man who started it all, now shrank in his seat. He leaned back, suddenly less smug, less sure. I didn't mean for this to spiral, he muttered. You paid her to remove me, Marcus said flatly. That's a federal crime. It was just a suggestion. Richard stammered. With cash, Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'll let the legal team decide what to call it. Jamal looked at him, eyes wide. What do we do now? Marcus took a breath. Now. We wait for the chairman to call back. I'm done explaining myself. He turned toward the cockpit. Let Horizon's leadership explain this to the world. Karen, now visibly sweating, tried to speak. We can still fix this. No, Marcus interrupted. You had your chance. Now you face the consequences. For the first time. David was silent. Even Stephen said nothing. The only sound in the cabin was the soft hum of engines and the whir of phones uploading the truth. Marcus sat back down, slowly, eyes closed for a beat. And when he opened them, he was no longer a man defending his presence. He was a man preparing to rewrite the rules. Karen stood stiff as a board, lips pressed tight, as if trying to swallow back everything she had just admitted. But the words were out. The damage was done. And Marcus, seated now in full command of the cabin, didn't need to raise his voice. The authority was no longer in her hands. It had shifted, fully, permanently. To his, you wanted to protect first class, Marcus said calmly. But all you've done is show the world who you protect, and who you try to erase. She didn't respond. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit, toward the crew galley, toward anything that might give her an exit. But there was none. The cabin had turned against her, and the silence of her colleagues told her exactly how alone she was. Just then, co-pilot Stephen Hayes emerged, pushing the cockpit door open with a bit too much force. This ends now, he said, glaring at Marcus. Either you move to the back, or I will contact JFK and divert this aircraft back to the gate. Do you understand? Several passengers gasped audibly. You're going to ground this flight over your own crew's misconduct, Chloe shouted from her seat. Unbelievable. Ethan stood tall, arms crossed. You're going to delay an entire plane because you don't like who's sitting in seat 2A. Stephen turned red but didn't back down. This is a safety issue, he snapped. No, Marcus said, standing again. This is a race issue, and I've already made the necessary calls. The chairman of your airline will be made aware before your feet ever hit the ground. Jamal stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Marcus and Stephen. This is wrong, sir, he said to the co-pilot. He's done nothing but sit here. You and Karen are escalating this, not him. Stephen rolled his eyes. You're a trainee. You don't make calls on security. And yet I'm the only one acting with decency, Jamal replied. Voice steady, fists clenched at his sides. Karen, desperate to reassert control, reached for the cabin intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice slightly shaking, please remain calm while we handle a disruptive individual who refuses to comply with seating protocol. That's when it broke. Not Marcus. The cabin. Sophie stood. Chloe stood. Ethan raised his voice, calm but firm. That's enough. We're not letting this continue. One by one, passengers rose. Some crossed the aisle. Some stepped into it. They weren't rioting. They were forming a wall, a quiet, respectful wall of resistance. Between Marcus and the flight crew, a white woman from row 1 who hadn't spoken until now whispered, I've seen enough. A middle-aged Latino man 2 rows back added, You're not putting your hands on him. And then came the chant. It didn't start loud, but it spread like a flame. Let him sit. Let him sit. Over and over. Karen's eyes widened. Stephen stepped back, unsure for the first time. David remained near the galley, frozen, silent, pale. Marcus turned to Jamal. Call Natalie. Tell her I want corporate looped in. Now. Jamal nodded, already dialing. A beat later, he spoke quietly into the phone. Yes, Miss Cruz. This is Carter. Mr. Bennett is requesting immediate escalation to Horizon's executive chain. Karen tried to speak. There's no need. But Marcus raised a hand. Stop. His voice was low, full, unshakable. I gave you chances to walk away from this with your dignity. You chose something else. Jamal held the phone toward Marcus. It's Laura Peterson, Vice President of Operations. She's live. Marcus took it. Laura, this is Marcus Bennett. You're watching what's happening. Yes, sir, Laura's voice came through, curt and shaken. We've seen the footage. The chairman has been informed. Good, Marcus said. Then let me make this simple. This deal. The $3 billion investment I came here to finalize. It's suspended. Your airline is about to lose more than money. You're about to lose your future. A shudder passed through the cabin. Karen looked like she might collapse. Please, she whispered. We can explain. No, Marcus replied. Now you listen. But before he could continue, Sophie raised her phone again. You all need to see this, she said, voice sharp with disgust. This was posted last month by an anonymous crew member on Reddit. She turned the screen to face the front. It showed a slide from an internal Horizon Airlines training session, a leaked image. On it, bold text read, Prioritize VIP appearance, maintain premium optics. The example photo, a smiling white businessman in a suit. The do not prioritize photo, a black man in business casual. The entire cabin gasped. Jamal stared at it in shock. That's real. He muttered, I've seen that slide in training. So have I, whispered a young flight attendant passing by from the rear cabin. I thought it was just bad phrasing. But it wasn't. The passengers were now livid. Chloe pointed directly at Karen. You followed that training. You just admitted it. Karen's knees buckled slightly. We weren't told to act like this. She stammered. We were just following the optics policy, which you knew was wrong, Marcus said coldly. And you enforced it anyway. Jamal looked at him with admiration. What do we do now? Sir, now, Marcus said. We fix it. Starting today. The wall of passengers held firm, silent, and unbreakable. In a cabin once divided by status, a man they tried to move was now the one reshaping the air they breathed. and with a single phone call still in his hand. Marcus Bennett wasn't just sitting in first class anymore. He was taking control of the flight itself. The phone in Marcus's hand buzzed again. And this time, the voice that came through wasn't just another assistant or mid-level executive. It was Laura Peterson, Vice President of Operations, speaking with a new urgency. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice firm but breathless. "We've verified your identity, cross-checked boarding records, and reviewed the footage. I've just spoken directly with Chairman Callahan. He's authorized me to issue a full, formal apology on behalf of Horizon Airlines." Karen gasped quietly behind him. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. "I'm listening," he said, still facing forward, still surrounded by the human wall of passengers who had risen with him. "Chairman Callahan wishes to express his personal regret." Laura continued. "He's seen the posts. He's seen the stream. He understands the gravity of what's occurred." A pause. Then the hammer fell. "We're prepared to grant you full discretionary authority over the continuation of the Pinnacle partnership, including the immediate termination of the involved crew." That silence, chilling, absolute, fell over the first-class cabin like fog. Marcus let the offer sit in the air for a moment, then said clearly, "Then I accept the authority. Effective immediately. Karen Mitchell, David Walsh, and Stephen Hayes are relieved of duty. This flight proceeds without them." Karen's knees gave slightly. David dropped his gaze to the floor. Stephen, still standing at the cockpit threshold, muttered, "This can't be happening." "It is," Marcus replied without turning to him. "And it's happening because none of you could look past your own prejudice long enough to see the truth sitting right in front of you." Laura's voice returned. "Understood. The crew will be formally suspended pending final HR termination upon landing. Mr. Bennett, we deeply regret your experience. I've instructed staff to begin damage control with passengers and the public. Don't bother with spin," Marcus said. "Start with accountability." Then he turned to Jamal and handed him the phone. "Put her on speaker." Jamal complied. The entire cabin could now hear Laura's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Laura Peterson, Vice President of Operations at Horizon Airlines. What happened aboard Flight HA-237 was unacceptable. Effective immediately. The involved crew members are being terminated, and Horizon will be conducting a full investigation into systemic issues that allowed this to happen. On behalf of our company, I apologize to Mr. Bennett and to every passenger who witnessed this," passengers murmured, some with relief, some with anger that it took this much. Chloe nodded slowly. Ethan crossed his arms. Olivia, the previously silent VIP passenger, spoke quietly. Finally, then Marcus spoke again, this time not to the passengers, not to the crew, but into his phone. "Natalie," he said, "confirm action." His assistant's voice was calm, almost solemn. "Confirmed. As of 10:26 a.m. Eastern, Pinnacle Investment Group has formally canceled the $3 billion fleet expansion deal with Horizon Airlines." The words hit like a thunderclap. David leaned against the galley wall. "Ashen-faced," Karen whispered. "Oh my God." Sophie gasped. "That's it," she said quietly. "That's what will crash their stock." Ethan nodded. "They had the future in their hands, and they threw it away over bias," Chloe added. "And now he's giving it to someone who deserves it." Jamal, still holding the phone, looked stunned. That deal, it was real, very real. Marcus said, and now, very gone. Passengers clapped, not loud, not explosive, just enough to show the moment had landed, that justice had weight, that silence would no longer be the only sound after discrimination. Then came the twist no one expected. David, still silent in the corner, suddenly spoke. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I didn't just follow orders," he said slowly. "I helped make the list." The cabin turned toward him. "What list?" Marcus asked. David swallowed hard. Karen and we kept track of passengers who didn't match first-class standards, especially black men, young Latinos, anyone who looked like they didn't belong. Chloe was stunned. "You're admitting that you need to hear it," David said, eyes wet. "We reported them, blocked upgrades, flagged them for behavioral patterns before they ever stepped on board. We thought we were protecting the brand. You were protecting your comfort," Marcus corrected, "and endangering your company's soul." Karen remained silent, her face blank. She had no defense left. Sophie said softly, "You're not just guilty. You were organized." Ethan's voice rose. "And you did this while taking paychecks from a company that sold itself as inclusive." David gave a half nod, barely able to look up. "I know. And I deserve to be fired. You deserve to be banned," Marcus said. He turned to Jamal. "Make sure HR notes that. No eligibility for rehire. Not for David, not for Stephen, not for Karen." "Noted," Jamal said, holding the phone like it was a live wire. Laura's voice returned on speaker. "We'll honor all final instructions, and we'll begin the process of revisiting our hiring and training policies as of today." "No," Marcus said. "You'll rebuild them." He paused, then added, "And Jamal Carter, promote him, immediately. He showed more professionalism in 1 hour than your leadership has in a decade." Jamal's eyes widened. "Sir, thank you." Marcus nodded once. "You earned it." Around the cabin, passengers exhaled. Some smiled. Others still held phones, not out of shock anymore, but to remember, to capture proof that change wasn't just possible, but unfolding right in front of them. Sophie uploaded her final post before the plane even left the tarmac. "CEO cancels 3B deal mid-flight. Racism costs Horizon Airlines everything." And just like that, the tide had turned, not with shouting, not with rage, but with clarity, truth, and power. A man they tried to reduce became the one who redefined the moment, not with revenge, but with reform. With the crew suspended and the cabin still pulsing from the shock of David's confession, Marcus remained standing at the center of it all, no longer just a wronged passenger, but now the one directing the course of the airline's future. He took a breath, calm but commanding, and turned to Jamal. "Patch Natalie and Daniel Kim onto the line. I want legal and financial oversight aligned within the next 10 minutes. Jamal nodded, moving with quiet urgency as passengers leaned back, eyes still locked on the man who'd just canceled a $3 billion deal from Seat 2A. A moment later, Marcus's phone connected to a secure conference call. Natalie Cruz, his sharp, unflinching executive assistant. "Came through first? Mr. Bennett, we've updated our media response log. Stockwatch is live. We're already seeing a 12% drop for Horizon on the morning board. Daniel Kim, Pinnacle's senior board member, added in. We've also documented everything from Sophie's footage to David's confession. Legal teams standing by if Horizon needs assistance during public fallout. Do you want to proceed with temporary reinstatement?" "Yes," Marcus said, "but under strict conditions, full oversight. I'll assume interim authority for ethics compliance inside Horizon's training division. No PR games, just real change." On speaker, Laura Peterson's voice returned. "We accept, and Jamal Carter's promotion has been logged. Effective immediately. He'll report directly to VP of Guest Experience." Jamal's eyes widened. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You earned it," Marcus replied, not as a gesture, but as fact. Around the cabin, you could feel the temperature shift. Passengers weren't just observers now. They were part of something, witnesses to the real-time unraveling of a broken system and the first stitches of something better being sewn into place. Karen, seated now near the galley under passive supervision, had been silent for nearly 10 minutes, The once smirking flight lead now sat rigid, her hands in her lap, knuckles pale. She had heard it all, the firings, the confirmations, the promotion of the young man she once dismissed as just a trainee. Finally, she spoke. Not loud, not angry, but low and tight, as if the weight of the moment had finally pressed through her armor. "You're not the first," she said to Marcus, her eyes distant. He didn't move. "What did you say? You're not the first black man I've removed from first class." Karen repeated, "You're just the first who had the power to stop me." Her voice trembled on that last word. "I covered complaints. Every time. Told the gate agents it was a misunderstanding. Told the supervisors that the customer got aggressive. Told myself they didn't belong. And each time, it got easier. A slow, stunned silence washed over the passengers. No one moved. Even Jamal stopped mid-task, his pen frozen in mid-air. How many, Marcus asked, voice quiet but cutting. Karen blinked. 7. Maybe 8. Over 2 years. Maybe more. I didn't keep a list. But I remember their faces. I always remember the look in their eyes. Like they were trying to prove they deserved something they'd already earned. Her voice cracked now, like a dam beginning to give. Some of them cried. Some argued. Some just left. One man gave up and flew home. Said he'd never fly again. And I just kept smiling and moving to the next row like it never happened. Sophie raised her phone again, but this time slowly. "Are you okay with this being recorded?" Karen didn't even look at her. "It should be." Marcus stepped closer, voice low but razor sharp. "You didn't just act on your bias. You engineered silence around it. You robbed people of dignity, and worse, you knew exactly what you were doing." "Yes," Karen whispered. "I knew. And no one at Horizon ever stopped you. I made sure they couldn't." She said, "I deleted the reports, reworded the incidents, said it was guest misconduct or security risk. I was good at making people look dangerous on paper." Ethan let out a slow breath. "So it wasn't just attitude. It was structure. Routine," Chloe added. "A system inside a system, wrapped in uniforms and policy." Jamal looked visibly shaken. I had no idea." "That's because you were never meant to," Karen said, finally looking at him. "They didn't train you to catch bias. They trained you to serve around it." Laura Peterson, still on the speakerphone, said, "Mr. Bennett, I'll request a full internal audit immediately. If there are other suppressed cases, we will surface them." Marcus nodded. "Not just audit them, compensate them. Reach out to every passenger removed under her watch. Start with flight logs from the last 3 years. I want apologies issued, credits refunded, and statements in writing." Natalie's voice came next, already creating a policy framework. "Sir, Emma Torres is drafting a public statement from the Pinnacle Board endorsing corporate transparency across the aviation sector." "Good," Marcus said. "We're not just cleaning Horizon. We're setting a precedent." Karen lowered her eyes again. "I understand why you fired me. I just didn't think it would ever come back like this. It always does," Marcus said. "Maybe not the day after. Maybe not even the year after. But the truth doesn't forget. It waits. And when it finds you, it finishes what the system tried to bury." Jamal quietly folded his new employee badge and tucked it into his front pocket. "I'll make sure this never happens again," he said, not to Marcus, but to the cabin. Marcus looked at him, then at the passengers still standing, still watching, still feeling the ripple of everything unfolding in front of them. "Let's rebuild this place from the ground up," he said, not with statements, with structure, with people who see, not who stereotype, with a system that recognizes dignity the first time, not after disaster, and in that moment, inside a first-class cabin that had become a courtroom, a boardroom, and a battlefield all at once. The weight of reform began to settle, not as an idea, but as an action, and it was already moving. The plane was still grounded at JFK, but nothing about the atmosphere inside felt still. In the last 30 minutes, Flight HA-237 had become something no one on board would ever forget. A moment where a single seat became a symbol, where silence was finally broken, and where accountability, for once, wasn't delayed until after landing. With the crew terminated, the deal canceled and then conditionally reinstated, and Jamal officially promoted. The cabin had shifted from outrage to resolve. The passengers who had once sat in silence were now part of something larger. Some leaned over their seats in conversation. Others shook hands with Marcus as he quietly made his way back toward 2A. Chloe and Ethan were still standing, not because they had to, but because they chose to, as a form of quiet solidarity. Sophie was typing a final update into her phone. They thought he was just another passenger. Turns out, he's the one flying this airline toward justice. But Marcus didn't pause for cameras. He didn't soak in applause. He moved with quiet intention, stopping only to shake Jamal's hand. "You have a responsibility now," he said. "Use it better than they did." Jamal nodded, eyes full of determination. "I will." Just then, Natalie's voice came back through Marcus's earpiece. "Sir, we have an additional update. One of Horizon's former regional executives has come forward," with what Marcus asked. Stepping slightly aside from the aisle, Natalie replied. A signed statement. She admitted she raised concerns about racial profiling in Horizon's crew training modules nearly 2 years ago, but was told by senior management to stay quiet. They said, and I quote, "Don't make this a racial issue." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. That was the final twist. The rot had never just been in the cabin. It had been institutional, protected, endorsed, swept beneath HR language and marketing slogans. And now, it was fully exposed. "Send that statement to Laura Peterson," he said, "and to every board member of Horizon before this plane takes off." "Already in motion," Natalie confirmed. "Pinnacle's compliance division is preparing a joint report. The media will receive it within the hour." He returned to his seat, folded his hands in his lap, and looked out the window, not to escape, but to reflect. Across the aisle, Olivia Grant caught his eye for the first time all morning. She gave a subtle nod, not one of pity, but of respect. "Thank you," she said softly, "for handling this with grace." He nodded back. "It wasn't grace," he said quietly. "It was necessity." 15 minutes later, the plane began to taxi again. There was no announcement about what had happened, no loud apology over the speakers, just movement, forward, Horizon Airlines. Once the subject of silent accusations and buried complaints, was now the focal point of a public reckoning. One sparked not by hashtags, but by voices in a cabin, a phone call, and a refusal to stand down. Marcus reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a folded document, and made a note in the margin. "Equity isn't policy, it's people." 3 months later, the legacy was visible. Horizon had rolled out a full-scale audit of every first-class seating dispute in the past 3 years, issuing direct apologies and refunds to more than 120 passengers who had been flagged or removed under questionable circumstances. Jamal Carter now led a new division called Equity in Flight, overseeing mandatory anti-bias training designed by outside experts. With quarterly public reports on crew behavior patterns, Karen, David, and Stephen's employment records were flagged across FAA systems, making rehiring nearly impossible. And Marcus, he returned, not just as a partner, but as the face of Horizon's transformation. He declined any ceremonial title, no compensation, no billboard, just one televised address. Now part of every internal onboarding video at the company. Prejudice tried to drag me to the back of the plane, he said, standing at a podium bearing both the Pinnacle and Horizon logos. But I stayed seated, not out of defiance, but because I belonged where I had paid to sit, where I had earned the right to be. The truth is, dignity doesn't walk in with fanfare. It walks in quietly, dressed in the same suit you mocked, and when injustice tries to push it out, dignity holds its ground and says no. His message traveled further than any plane. Industry leaders praised it. Former victims reached out with their own stories. News anchors called it a defining moment in the push for ethical aviation, and for Marcus Bennett. It wasn't about revenge. It was never about punishment. It was about resetting the standard. For everyone who had ever been told they didn't look the part, who'd been asked to move, to wait, to leave, to explain themselves in ways no one else had to. It was about ending the pattern and beginning something new, something lasting.